We're joined today with Joe Mendez. He's a senior data analyst, senior BI analyst.
Right. Yes. So currently I'm working for Worldwide Flight Services. I'm a Power BI specialist there, and I do dashboarding pretty much all day. We do ETL stuff. We do data cleaning. We do scripts. I specialize in Power BI, so a lot of the other developers they'll come to me when they have some ideas like special technique. Joe, do you think this could be done in Power BI? I haven't tried this, and I'll do research on my side and try to develop new Power BI techniques. Previously, I was a senior business intelligence analyst for the city of San Antonio, and there we did a lot of the same. We had siloed data, so we did a lot of ETL stuff. For the last year that I was there, I just wrote SSIS scripts, and it was just pulling in data from an Oracle database and a SQL Server database to get it in the report database so we can get our final reports in production. So I spent a year straight just writing queries, just developing packages to get the transformed data into the final reporting server. Before that, I was another database manager. It was another database manager role. And I managed the company databases there and the client databases. And the specific challenges there were, I guess, gaining insights from our data, because I was the only data analyst there. So that's what I was pretty much doing full time, just taking a look at the data, trying to find what story can we tell with the client data, what story can we tell with our warehouse data. So that's in a nutshell, that's the last 10 years of work I've done.
So why did we start Japio, right? So we want data professionals to stop hand coding and start accelerating analytic projects, right? 80% of their time is spent on data wrangling, as you know, the 80-20 rule right now. Japio's goal is to flip that and make it more productive. Instead of spending 80% of your time on tedious data wrangling, data prep, you're now spending more of your time on actual data analysis. So talk to me about the challenges that you have experienced with data wrangling, things like that.
So the most pertinent example is the last year or two at the city, where I was writing queries, just long, huge queries that are, hundreds of lines long, that are complex and maybe overly convoluted. And maybe it's not the best practice, because you hand this to someone else, so they don't know what I wrote, right? Only I know what I wrote. But it was a necessary step to get our final transformed data. I mean, we have two disparate siloed data sources that need to communicate with each other, and we need to merge that data and get it to what the end client wants. So yeah, data wrangling is always a challenge. So far, I've not seen a situation or setup where you can get around just ETL processes and daily scripts and cron jobs and Windows task scheduler batch jobs. I mean, it seems like pretty much. I mean, I freelance on the side as well, so all these small companies I'm seeing, they have this similar issues. They're having data wrangling issues, and they need data engineers and people who can write queries.
Yeah.
So the one we used at the city was we used SSIS, and I think the most common type of error was data type errors. So you have to interpret multiple systems, and then they have to be the same error, the same data type, otherwise errors are going to be thrown. So that was a challenge, trying to unify the different data types. Having to know two different flavors of SQL, 2 or 3 different kinds. I come from a SQL Server background, so when I spend the last 2 years doing SQL Server, and then I have to do Oracle PL SQL, having to relearn the syntax or learn an additional syntax. That's a challenge. Timing. You have two different systems. They're not in sync necessarily. One is live, right? And the other could be, you know, only live for the last day. So compensating for that, we had a huge section of our SSIS to just compensate for the time difference between the two systems. Yeah, those are a few things.
What's your current method as far as piping data to your BI tool or a data warehousing tool right now?
Right now I'm using two methods. I have a SQL server, and I just do, so we use Power BI, right? I'm a Power BI specialist.
Yep.
So in Power BI, there's a direct query and import. I do an import and the SQL query behind the scenes, right? So I do a SQL query and import, and I get it into Power BI. The other method.
How much time does that take you?
It depends. Sometimes it's very simple, straightforward. Joe, I just want a data dump of the HR data, and I want to know the hire date and if they were terminated, the termination date. And I take a look at the tables and I say, oh, perfect. It's just these two tables, hire and termination. And it's a simple join. And I'm familiar with that database, so it takes 90 seconds. More complex ones. At the city, I spent maybe a month or two of back and forth between me and the end client, like a month just developing a query. So best case scenario, like I know where the tables are, it takes 90 seconds or something, you know, or maybe I have to learn a new technique, it takes an afternoon. But if there's an extensive back and forth, that could go on for weeks.
The last questions will be, if I wanted a job as a data analyst or a BI analyst, and I'm coming right out of college, what would you recommend that I know and navigate the job market?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because you know, what's funny is like everything I learned in college, I did not end up using in any of my jobs. I majored in mathematics, and I minored in computer science, so it's like it was far off. But in college, I learned Java, Fortran, Perl, C. I don't use any of those. Right now, I use Python, SQL, VBA, JavaScript, and about 4 different BI platforms. So if I were to recommend, if I were to speak to like some kid in college and give some recommendations, I think a good foundation, I think it's going to stay in Python. I think that's a good core, and you want additional technologies that will compound on top of that. And I think the 1-2 punch of Python and SQL, I mean, that's going to take you far. And even Excel, just having like being an Excel power user, that has gotten me just as far as programming. Being able to like, handle yourself in Excel, even just knowing the shortcuts, like doing something live on the spot at the, like the VP or the CEO is over my shoulders, and I'm just quickly flying through Excel. I know all the shortcuts, how to create a table, create a pivot. I could fly through it quick. So even Excel, it's really underrated. I mean, programmers are kind of snobby towards it, right?
Yeah, because like I feel like Excel, you're also limited, right? You're limited on the amount of rows. You're limited on the amount of things that you can actually do within Excel, right? So
that's true, but with Excel, I mean, it's an all-in-one platform. You could. I worked at the city. I worked under the chief data officer, Naji Tabet. And he always had this saying. He says, Joe, with Excel and VBA, you could power a small country. That's how powerful it is. And I started like, all right, Naji, sure. And I got more into VBA, and I saw its capabilities, and you can interact with, the Windows. So you can, we made we made setups and apps where you do the email automation, where it's a completely app-like experience. And this is, I mean, this is simple and it's intuitive, and we did it in VBA. We didn't need any complex software or extensive know-how other than VBA. So Excel, although it's limited, it's incredibly powerful still. And as far as yeah, the role limit is a big one. I mean, in that case, you use CSV files and then you start using Python. But yeah, the role limit sucks.